Where does our food come from? For many of us, the answer is clear from farms and fields, sometimes far away from the city, but that is not the full picture. Today, we want to tell a different story of courtyards, of parks and communities growing food within the city center. This is Urban Lunch Talk, episode 42, on the theme of From Soil to City Lessons on Urban Food Production. I am Jakob Schabus. I work for IQ Samhällsbyggnad, the Swedish Center for Innovation and Quality in the Built Environment. And I also work for the Driving Urban Transitions Partnership. And today I have the great pleasure of moderating this conversation. In this Urban Lunch Talk, we want to look at the benefits and the challenges around urban food production. And we also want to see what role research and innovation can play in enhancing the practice. We have experts joining us with a research and innovation background, but also bringing in a startup perspective. And with that, let me introduce our fantastic panel of experts. We have, in alphabetical order, Cameron Kennett. Cameron is a PhD candidate at the Swedish Environmental Institute and at the Royal Institute of Technology. And Cameron is also part of the DOT FOCUSE project. Welcome. We have Leah van Wesenbeeck. She is associate professor at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. I hope I said that correctly. And Leah is also part of the DOT Feed for Food project. And then we have Pauline van der Vlasseke. She is founder of the startup Vegger, and she is also part of the DOT Hat project. A warm welcome to all of you. And before we begin, I would like to mention that this webinar is being recorded. It will be published on our YouTube channel and sent to anyone who's joining today. And I would also like to encourage you all to ask questions, to share your thoughts in the chat, as we will devote some time for them towards the end of this webinar. With that, let's get started by introducing our panel of experts. I would like to give each of you a moment to share a bit about your background in relation to this topic. Going again alphabetically, Cameron, you are working on the DOT Focus project with resource efficiency and environmental performances of urban vertical farms. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak here, and thank you very much to the DUT platform for hosting this. So yes, I actually come from a humanities background with my bachelor's, but the key thing there was ecological economics, which opened up this box of frogs really for me, which propelled me into my master's, which is really in industrial ecology, which is really the foundations for this sort of systems that we're dealing with the focus of food. And from there, I really got involved in the project through master thesis, talking about how to make these urban food productions more circular, and taking this key concept, what we like to call industrial symbiosis. And this feeds really nicely into what we're doing in the FOCUS project. And the FOCUS project is quite a bit of an acronym, bit of a mouthful here. It's food production and provisioning through circular urban systems in European cities. Wow. But it's a very eclectic project. It's very, on the one hand, interdisciplinary, because we have lots of different faculties of minds coming in from social sciences, engineering background, and some even humanities as well. And it's very transdisciplinary. Why? Because we work a lot with municipalities, different stakeholders, and of course, research institutes and academic actors. There's very thematic topics that we work with, from quantifying to mapping the urban food production of cities, to the morphology of these studies, right down to conducting experiments, which I would like to talk about a little bit later on, and even where very much we like to have this pedagogical driven aspect of it as well, to disseminate back to younger people, to adults as well. So what I would like to also refer you to is a link that I think will be provided is to our Focus Hub page, where you can read a little bit more in your spare time. Feel free to do so. And also there are some papers that we've already had the pleasure of publishing from our colleagues over in Wrocław University from Poland. So please delve your eyes into that. And I thank you very much and look very forward to this conversation with you all. Thank you.
Fantastic, Cameron. Thank you so much for these insights and looking forward to hearing more. Then next up, we have Leah. Leah, you have tremendous experience working with food security, urban food production, and many other projects. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me here in this very interesting, um, let's say, mode of talking about urban agriculture. Um, in addition to being an associate professor, I'm also heading the Amsterdam Center for World Food Studies at the same university. And we try to understand why people are food and nutrition insecure and try to develop solutions for their problems in a system perspective. And one of the pathways we have been exploring is indeed looking at the possibilities for urban agriculture. And urban agriculture not only brings food, but it also is a way to include people that are neglected, people that are provided, or just are left out of society. So we had this experience in various countries, in various lots of different environments. So we had projects in Benin where we looked at the possibilities for urban farming to give income and also being seen, let's say, for women, lonely women with children. We did also projects on urban agriculture in the Caribbean together with FAO. And now we are within the context of DUT exploring the possibilities for inclusive and regenerative agriculture in cities in Greece, Cyprus, and Romania. So we are really looking at how can we design spaces such that they become accessible for people with disabilities, either mental or physical, and that they become places where people will trust in themselves, but also showcase what you can do as an employer with people that you may not find attractive to work with. So we really are focusing on how can we become an inclusive force in the urban setting, but also, of course, providing good and healthy food to the people in urban areas. So no doubt we will talk more about this, so I want to leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. And looking forward to hearing more about the inclusiveness perspective. Last but not least, Pauline, you are the founder of a startup. You're involved in the DUT project and also have a lot of experience working with food systems. Could you tell us a little more about your background?
Yeah, of course. And thanks, Jacob, for the invite for this lunch talk. It's really nice to be here. I'm Pauline van de Vlasakker, and I'm the founder of Vrije. I also have an academic background. Actually, I did a bachelor in human nutrition and health and a master in organic agriculture in Wageningen at the Wageningen University. And during my studies, I really got interested in food systems. So human nutrition was really focused on like what do we eat and what is healthy and how can we promote healthy food choices. But then I really was more into like where does the food come from? Because in the end, that also really matters in connecting, people with food and the right food choices. So then I did my master's in organic agriculture, and I also started Vrije. And with Vrije, the goal was actually to really put things into practice. So really start projects and create products that would improve environments where people go to school or where people live and people work, and also produce food in a really sustainable way, so without pesticides, and also bringing it close to where people are. And I also worked on different research projects in the Netherlands and Sweden. So what I think is really great with Vrije is that I can use this knowledge that I got from academia, but also put it into real life practices. That's really challenging, but also really fun to do.
Fantastic, and looking forward to hearing more. Now, I would like to begin our conversation today by letting each of you finish a sentence and give our audience a bit of a taste of what urban food production is all about. And I'm gonna turn it around this time, starting with you, Pauline. Your sentence is what inspires me about urban food production is.
Yeah. Well, what inspires me about urban food production is that I think it's a really important aspect of getting access to healthy food produced in a healthy way, but also that it has a really social aspect of it. So I mean, everyone is connected to food somehow. Everyone needs to eat. And I think growing food almost has some like spiritual aspect. And I think like by growing food in a place where people are also living and working, I think it really can connect people together. It really has a social value of its own. So that's something that really inspires me.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Now, Leah, turning to you, your sentence is the main challenge with urban food production is.
For me, the main challenge is to get access to secure access to land, because in urban context, it's often difficult to find places where you can do urban agriculture, particularly if you have this additional objective of involving people with possible disabilities or people that have hindrances, social hindrances to reach those areas. So then there are additional constraints, let's say, to where we can do urban agriculture, and we need a lot of policy support from urban planners to actually have secure access. So what we have seen, unfortunately, is that sometimes there is enthusiasm with a certain, let's say, a group of elected officials, and then they are elected out of office, and the next group doesn't have this same feeling about the importance or the location. So I think that is a major challenge for sustainable urban agriculture.
Very important point, and we will come back to the challenges later on. Now, turning to you, Cameron, your sentence is the most important thing with urban food production is. Now, Cameron, what's the most important thing?
Well, I would say absolutely agree with everything that's been mentioned, and also because those are very important, the social aspects. Something that I think is really interesting to look into, and something that I've been working a lot with, in these controlled environment agricultural systems, the vertical farming, aquaponic systems. And I think the most important thing, or one of the most important things from this perspective, is the potentiality to help alleviate conventional farming systems, which is also misconstrued. It's not there as a competitor. I truly believe it's there to support these systems, and also to make cities more sustainable and resilient, I think, is a very key term here as well, while providing exactly what Leah and Pauline said, access to healthy and nutritious foods. If I unpack that very briefly, on the one hand, it can be very space efficient if you find these zero acreage. So you're not creating new spaces to put these, let's say, vertical farms in. Also helps reduce the risk of diseases spreading. And then when you scale that, it can be very strengthened very much when you integrate these with local systems, with residential private spaces as well. You can tap into all sorts of resources and nutrients. And then you scale that one level further to the city level. There's also the potentiality of this connection between different industries, not necessarily urban agriculture related as well. So I think this is such an important area that we're looking at, and it's fantastic to definitely discuss these things for sure.
Excellent. And bringing in both scaling, but also co-benefits, which we're going to come back to just in a moment. Thank you all for giving us these glimpses already on the topic. And I would like to build on that now. So urban food production, growing, processing, distributing food within cities and the surrounding areas. I would like to just make it concrete, maybe for some in the audience who are not experts on the subject. What are examples of urban food production to make this very concrete? Pauline, if I could give that to you, maybe.
Yeah, of course. So I think urban agriculture can be really wide. I mean, you have what Cameron also mentioned, like quite large vertical farms inside the city center, but also like a bit more like community gardens where people in living neighborhoods gather together. So it really goes from small scale to larger scale. But I think the thing that all urban agricultural practices have in common is that it's like accessible and close to the city. I mean, inside the city area, but also around the city where people really go and gather and like connected to the city.
Excellent. And you're already pointing out that there's two different systems, right? There can be a community way of farming, but it can also be from an economic perspective. Leah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to raise that point because it's important to acknowledge that not all urban agriculture initiatives are by definition social initiatives. Cameron also hinted at that. They can be purely commercial, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different way of supporting food supply in cities. So you have a purely commercial, very highly efficient, very water efficient also way of producing crops, which indeed is also good in terms of being disease resistant. And that coexists with, on the far end, let's say, initiatives that are really not about efficiency at all, but really focusing on how to include people. And I think there's all kinds of hybrid firms in between. So partly commercialized, but still garden-like things, even home gardens where people may have informal ways of exchanging food. So there's a whole wide range of initiatives that we all call urban agriculture, from purely commercial to purely non-commercial and hybrid forms. I think it's very important to recognize this, because I think in the common opinion, many times when you talk about urban agriculture, people do have this image of the social farm, which is fine, but it's not the only viable alternative.
Excellent. Thank you for pointing that out and clarifying that we're not talking about two different ways here, but more of a spectrum of different approaches. Now, I wonder, we have now given some examples of what we are talking about, and you all have concrete experience of working with the subject. So I wonder, what are the co-benefits that you have come across around urban food production?
Yeah, I can begin on that. From a social perspective, but also focusing very much, I think, on the education side of things. I think it's super important, and what we've experienced in the FOCUSE project is when we've had these pedagogical dissemination activities, whether there's young school children to adults, everybody takes something very much important away from it. And what I really appreciate as well is even people who never even thought that they would be into like gardening or getting their hands dirty as well, or learning about these systems. I think it's very inspirational, and I think for every single person who comes across and asks the question when we're in the vertical farm or this open greenhouse activity, what are you doing? A young child might say, and then we explain to them, and they're instantly just already excited and want to learn more about it. I think that's already a great achievement and fantastic, especially when we talk about the people, like for future generations as well, right? We have a responsibility to keep these activities in the limelight for a healthier city, and then you can completely scale that out to a healthier planet, both for ecological and for health benefits as well. So I really think the educational side of it is really a great co-benefit to have, and very inspirational.
Excellent. So you're talking here about educational aspects, but I also heard you bring in a health perspective, and I guess that is also about access to healthy food, vegetables, and so on. Now, I wonder also, Leah, I think it was you who previously mentioned the side of inclusion and that urban food production connects to that. Could you tell us a little bit more there?
Yeah, because we know that there is an increasing segregation in our societies, unfortunately, and we see that urban gardening, especially when it's not purely commercial, can be a great force in bringing people together. And it has, I think you talked about co-benefits. So it has benefits for both for the people maybe with disabilities or refugees, for them, but also for the other people. So it comes from two sides. The first is that I think Pauline mentioned it, cultivating food has almost something spiritual. So people take great pride, and then they are again able to do something to say, well, I'm not someone that you should look upon with pity because I have a disability. I'm someone that is really proud, and I'm providing food for you. So that's one element, to give people back their sense of dignity and the sense of belonging and contributing to the community. On the other hand, it's also that other people may look at this people with disabilities with pity, and they discover like, oh no, that's not true. This is a really valuable person, and they can really contribute, and they can work with them. So it changes the mindset of co-workers, but also hopefully that's also what the Feed for Food is trying to establish, hopefully also in the eyes of future employers. Like, oh, with some small adaptations to my workspace, I can actually employ people that I previously thought would not be useful for my business. So it's making the transition also. So it's making lots of transitions in the minds of people, but also in the minds of people that may want to employ others, or think, or even the customers that come and buy things, that they see, oh, this is just a normal person. Like, I don't need to be afraid of them. If you talk about refugees, sometimes this is idea like, oh, they are different and I should fear them. But also I should not take pity upon them, because they are really valuable. And I think that is the co-benefit. So it's about food, like also Pauline said, it's something so essential, it binds us, and also Cameron referred to that, it's binding us together. And through food, also making connections. That is really, I think, what the co-benefit of urban agriculture can be. But it's not coming by itself. You should take effort, and what's also what we're doing in Feed for Food, in designing these spaces so that people can actually access them, in designing the interaction so that such things happen. So it needs effort, and you really need to monitor it, because it will not, happen by itself.
So that is even a key role for society and even democracy, I would say, by bringing together people from various perspectives, perhaps from various political beliefs, but people also with disabilities, without, and so on, and make them engage with each other and build up relations. That is fantastic to hear. Going from here, I would like to hear even more about co-benefits from you, and I would like to ask you all to tell a concrete story of a project that you're implementing, will implement, have implemented in a specific city. I would like to give each of you around 2 minutes and share a little bit about project work and what results it has delivered or maybe will deliver in the future, to see a little bit more about the role that R&I projects can play. This time, maybe we can start with Leah. I'll give the word to you.
Yes, so with Feed for Food, we are about halfway. So we are trying to monitor what is happening, but it also takes time to build the infrastructure, etc. So the example I would like to share is actually an example from a previous project we had in Benin, where we worked with female-headed households, poor female-headed households, and they were given a small allotment and some training. And that was in 2019, so just before COVID. And then COVID came, and then so it was a great natural experiment for us, because it turns out, of course, very much in line with expectations, that the people with their own urban garden were managed to survive the severe lockdowns that were happening in Benin much easier than the ones without. So this whole realization that we also had in Europe about the long supply chains that food now typically is characterized by, that was something that really also highlighted the importance of growing food nearby. Of course, it's not a panacea. I mean, you cannot grow all the food nearby, and if there's an accident happening in the city, then you also are, you have an issue. But that really helped us to understand how these particularly vulnerable populations can benefit from this urban garden with relatively very small investments. It's just like you have to have the land. Again, that comes back to how I started. You have to have the land, some training, and then actually it happens by itself, because people see the benefits and they become also more confident in knowing what they do, but also in confidence in, oh, I can actually sell something and get education for my children. So it's there that we saw these co-benefits that we also now are aiming for in our Feed for Food project. But like I said, we're halfway, so we expect that we can really say with confidence something like in about a year or so, that we also see those same impacts on the households that are participating.
Thank you so much, Leah, and very, very interesting, because when you started, I thought you were referring to co-benefits in the sense of that it can be for your mental health during a global pandemic very useful to be able to go to a garden to have such an activity. But as I understood you, this went way beyond to even much more existential questions, such as I have my own access to some food.
Yeah, it was really much more about the really access to food, specifically vegetables, so that also even under the pandemic conditions, people had access to a healthy diet. And that is something not only for themselves, because they could sell, of course, in the neighborhood still. That was a very important part in when we looked at nutrition indicators that kept their nutrition indicators quite okay when compared to pre-COVID situation, whereas for other people, we really saw a big decrease, so an increase in food and nutrition insecurity. So indeed, from a Western perspective, we are so used to having food always that we are focusing, like you did, almost without thinking on, oh, mental health, of course. But in a situation where food security is not so obvious, it really comes down to how can we ensure healthy food. And we know, of course, also Pauline and Cameron hinted at that people here even, they need to learn again what healthy food is and to reestablish the connection with healthy food. So again, it's not the mental health part only, it's really also the physical health that I think is benefiting from this direct connection of the urban consumer with the food that they eat.
Excellent. And there we are again at the different various co-benefits. Now, Pauline, I would like to give the word to you next.
Yeah, of course. Well, our research project just started, so I think it would be nicer to just give some results of a project that I did with Vrije, but also a project that I was involved with in Sweden in a research project on urban agriculture. So with Vrije, we started our first project in healthcare centers, and I think that was really a nice location also to start our first project, because we could see really the advantages of like bringing food production to elderly people, and also elderly people that had like issues like with dementia or other issues. And in those healthcare centers, at least in the Netherlands, the food is not always really amazing. Like in this specific healthcare center, we were in 6 different ones, but in one of them they were even only like serving frozen meals. And what was really nice to see was that the elderly people there, they were first of all really enjoying seeing food grow, because there also the plants there were all like fake plants and easy to maintain, of course. But here they were really enjoying seeing every day things changing and getting leaves and sometimes even flowers, because we were also growing edible flowers. And that's something that was really nice. But at the same time, the kitchen could also really use this fresh produce to offer next to this frozen meal also a fresh salad. And that was really nice also for these elderly people to actually have some new taste and some different dish next to this frozen meal. So I think that's a really concrete example of how it can really influence daily life and also food that is being served to these organizations. And I think another good example is garden, quite a large garden inside Linköping that was organized by 2 young guys. And they wanted to create a place for everyone by growing food, but in the same time not having it only being dependent on like subsidies, because they want to have something continuous. And that's quite I think a challenge also in urban agriculture, to create a project that's not only a project but that can also continue by itself. So what they did, and I think that was quite nice, is that they invited a lot of different people, also refugees, but also people from like any type of neighborhoods, young people, kids, older people. And they could just come there and enjoy music and food together and help with the gardening. And they made a deal with a local restaurant that they would buy their fresh produce. So in this way, they could also generate an income with this, like for this whole project. And also, of course, later on, that's what happening quite a lot with urban agriculture, like that they also offer like memberships for people to like buy bags of food. But I think it's quite smart to also make a bit larger deal with a restaurant, because then you have a fixed, like you know that things can continue, and you're not only depending on people coming there and buying the food. So I think that's also a nice example that's still alive.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing these examples. And there we are again also at the inclusion of vulnerable groups and what fantastic impacts that can have. Cameron, last but not least, I give the word to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's wonderful what both Pauline and Leah said. Just to say briefly 2 things about that. With Leah, I think it's so important becoming closer to food, and then everything that revolves around that is so much more than just consuming the food, right? It's the thought system and processes around that. And what Pauline said, I think, is currently the one of the most important underlying things to this value, right? How we value these things. If you look at total economic value, we don't just look at the market price, but what about the example that she used in the care homes, the elderly, the altruistic value, and also the aesthetic value that you place on these things. And I think that's also, looking at it from the social science point of view, very interesting things. From moving on to some examples of implementations from the FOCUSE project, we're very experimental. We really like our experiments and showing how these like these synergies, how to take these byproducts from one urban agricultural process and put them into another. And we just have a couple of really interesting examples that I'd like to mention. One of which, we're doing a lot of biomass recovery with mushrooms. So that's taking place in UAB in Barcelona, our colleagues over there, and also we're doing in Stockholm here some exciting stuff with that. So we're looking at the waste products of, let's say, a vertical farm, and instead of that organic waste conventionally going to the waste stream, we're taking a lot of it because it's packed with nutrients, and then we're putting it into these substrate blocks for the mushrooms to grow. And we're looking and testing different compositions, of which within those compositions there are different byproducts or waste streams from the cities that are coming into that, which is super interesting. We're having some really great results on that, which will be published in our FOCUSE consortium sooner rather than later. Also, another fantastic one is about building integration with these systems as well. In Barcelona, they are looking at how to play with respiration, with breathing of like children in a classroom, and having a greenhouse at the top, and then obviously feeding that CO2 and pumping it into the greenhouse, and then bringing back and cleaning filtered air back into the classroom. So that's another way how building integration can happen with with school children office blocks if they're all co-located. And that's a key word, I think, really, is co-location for us. How to have these synergies that take place co-located together with each other. And yeah, these are just literally a drop in the ocean of what we can do. And I think what we would like to explain a little bit later is that these are well from the experimental stage, but we need to do so much more to get them maybe at a greater maturity level of readiness as well. And I think national and technocratic bodies have a big role to play there to help, I think.
Excellent. And we will come to that in just a few minutes. Leah, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so maybe it's even a bridge, because I was thinking also what Pauline was saying about the need to have multiple ways of earning money, and also Cameron saying, well, you have these synergies that you can create, because it is very important when you do a project like a DUT project, that you try to think beyond the subsidy stage. So how can those initiatives actually have at least zero profit? So it's no need that they should strive for profit, but at least that they can continue, working and within also the objectives that they have. So be it socially or sustainable in an environmental sense. But how can we design business models that would help those initiatives to mature, to scale? That's why I say it's a bit of a bridge to scale up to being larger initiatives, and that can be through diversification. So like Pauline was saying, can you have contracts with restaurants, or can you maybe provide care homes, but maybe also having more educational initiatives, particularly if you are in countries that have a winter where you cannot grow vegetables outside. How would you, pass the winter time? Can you do something educational? Can you indeed do something in doing clean air or clean water? How can you use also what Cameron is saying, the byproducts of others, so that you together, maybe with other initiatives, you form one kind of sustainable, how you say it, group, so that maybe one what generated by the other is taking as input by the next. So thinking about what can you do? Should you have something which is really a product that is really tailoring to very rich people, that you can use to, say, co-fund some products that you really would like to be available for poor households? So think about all this healthy, like stuff made from garlic. Can you do something there? There was an example we had from Poland. I think, oh, that's interesting. Maybe we have to dig into that. So it's really about being very creative in trying to find ways to actually keep the initiative going and to increase also the scale.
Excellent. And you actually took away my next question, so that was perfect because that would have been what can you do so that these projects survive and continue beyond their funding cycle? And as I understood it, your answer to that is, well, of course, economics, funding, but also creativity. Pauline, I see that you had your hand up.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add that I think this creative business model aspect is super important because it's also just the fact that people do not really want to pay more for a crop than they would pay in a supermarket. I mean, otherwise it would be like so exclusive. And sometimes you see that happening, that you have like organic shops, for example, that have a higher price and they are also more focused on a specific group of people. But I think the nice thing and something that we should promote with urban agriculture is like having it accessible to everyone. So I think the challenge is in creating a business model where the crop has a similar price as in the supermarket. And I mean, it's another discussion if that should be actually the actual price or not. But in the same time, also have an ethical but also sustainable business model in a way. There's a lot of discussion around that as well. Has quite a lot of impact on the environment. And also when we started with Vrije, we also wanted to really create a way to grow food, but not like import a lot of plastics or unhealthy aspects from all over the world. But we really wanted to create, for example, a biodegradable grow pot. And that also had a lot of challenges because in the one hand, we wanted to create a biodegradable grow pot, but I mean, in the beginning, yes, we created the pots ourselves by hand, but yeah, that's not something that is scalable. So we wanted to create a machine line as well that could produce those pots, but also like all the machine builders that I've spoken with, they said, please use plastic pots instead because that's super easy, it's smooth, it always works. But we thought, yeah, we really wanted to do it differently. And in the end, we could find a way. So we're really proud of that, to create a sustainable grow pot in a really productive and scalable way. But it really needed quite a lot of persistence because in the end, the current business world and also food systems, I mean, most of our food systems are still really focused on only profit and not so much on the effects it has on the environment. So I think that's a really big challenge for many urban agricultural initiatives that want to continue.
Persistence, yeah, what an important word. And you already brought us to the challenges which we're going to talk about more. I want to encourage again people in the chat to ask questions if you have any. I already saw people making connections with each other, and that is fantastic. And I would also, before I give the word to Cameron, pull in the audience here and make it concrete again to different cities. So my question to our audience is, what is needed to boost urban food production in your city? Please share if you have any thoughts. Is it political will that you need? Is it finances? Is it space? Do let us know. So again, the question, what is needed to boost urban food production in your city? And I already see a first answer here from Marie-Claude Dubois, political will and money, definitely two very key elements. And we'll wait for some more responses, and I'll for now give the word to Cameron, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's just segueing on actually what one of the participants said, and also what Pauline and Leah have mentioned before. I think one of the biggest challenges is actually the way that we're pricing as well, and having the pleasure to work with a lot of small medium enterprises, mostly in Stockholm, but not unknown in other countries around the EU. Is the way that let's take an example, the bag of lettuce. It's if an SME is putting a lot of effort into delivering a good quality product, and what I mean by a good quality product is the nutritional value, they are not getting the right price for that because things are still done on weight. quite obvious there, and not really a solution has been found how to do that. So businesses are less, startups are less incentivized or they struggle. And what we see is, without a support mechanism from the municipalities, let's say, is a lot of these are going under. They're made bankrupt and have to file for liquidation, etc. And this is really sad to see, because going back to what Pauline mentioned as well, there is such an opportunity from a market perspective here for vulnerable people with employment. So creating even more job creation here, and also a product contribution of a better quality product for market economics. This really, on the one hand, sounds like a good thing, but it's very difficult to implement. And then this comes to the greater thing, which would be fantastic to hear what people think about, is this disconnect. So I feel like, from my experiences, that it's really been, research is very close with industry. However, then the gap to the policy making realm, which is super important to enact some of these things and support, whether through subsidies, tax breaks, or whatever it may be, that is missing. And I really believe that something needs to change fundamentally and quite quickly, because our agricultural systems are changing, and we need to change with them as well. So yeah, I believe that is an important topic as well, for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cameron. I see we have several questions here, or points in the chat. I'll start with Ricardo. Is cities pollution a challenge for urban farming? Leah, please go ahead.
Yes, it is, because it's both. It can be in the soil, so that if there are heavy metals or other pollutions in the soil, then you have an issue. There's also, if you have a urban farm, let's say next to a very busy road, then of course a lot of the fine dust and all the other fumes, they can come onto your crops. So it's definitely one of the challenges in finding a good spot for an open space urban garden. That's definitely a challenge. Also with water, I mean, where does the water come from that you use? Should you have a purifier before you can use it, because maybe it's also polluted with industrial waste or with organic waste? So it's posing an additional challenge when you compare it to, let's say, a rural area where you have a large field. Also, then you should check if the soil is okay. But in an urban setting, it's much more likely that something in the past has been there which has polluted the soil. So yeah, this is clearly, especially with open space urban agriculture, that is a main challenge. So what we try to do is also to combine open areas with a raised bed, because then at least you know that the compost you're putting, or the growing material that you're putting, that it is safe. But still, then you have the water, and you have, of course, the air pollution that may come down on your crop still. So yeah, very good point.
Excellent. Pauline, please.
Yeah, then actually that's also quite interesting, I think, to mention, because of course cities pollution is a challenge for urban agriculture, but it can also be the other way around. So urban agriculture can also be, I mean, it can also create pollution, because I think, yeah, Leah mentioned like raised beds is a good solution, but the thing is, the big difference between urban farming and conventional farming is that in urban farming there are also no rules involved. So of course it's really nice that people can learn, but on the other hand, it's nice if it's also a bit guided, or it has some explanations before everyone can do whatever they want. Because I was also involved in a research project in Sweden where we measured like nutrients flowing from the soil to the water underground, and some people, they just put so much whatever on their garden plot that it can actually also really contribute to the city's pollution. So we have to think about city's pollution and urban farming in both ways, I think.
So you're both really bringing in the interdependency here, and that different, policies even affect each other. Leah, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, so I completely side with Pauline. It's known that let's say home gardeners, they use much more pesticides, say, than farmers, because there are less regulations and less knowledge. So it's very good to also to stress that maybe we are now painting the picture like urban agriculture is this paradise, but there's also lots of downsides, of course, to it, and there's lots of things that go wrong. And like you say, well, it's learning, but yeah, that's also sometimes creating negative externalities. That's definitely true. So it's good to thank you, Pauline, for just also bringing a little bit more like the downside of things, and that it can also bring negative things, because that's clearly the case.
Pauline, back to you, and then Cameron.
Yeah, I just mentioned it, but of course, still, like, also conventional farming also has like many negative aspects. So it's not that, and I still also believe, of course, that the amount of urban agriculture is currently so small that the effect on the environment is also so small compared to conventional farming. But it's still like, if in the future urban agriculture really expands, then that is something to keep in mind.
Excellent. We're getting more comments in the chat. Cameron, I'm going to give the word in a second to you. And that is fantastic. Fantastic to have such an interested audience. I see one comment was from Diana, who hinted to a webinar series being done. And she said, there are great things happening, but the scale isn't there. And I would like to ask the three of you also, what role does scaling and replication play in your work as well? Is there something that you say, well, with the experiences we have, we can absolutely build on that, we can continue that, we can repeat it? Or would you say, well, each case is so individual that this is incredibly difficult? Cameron, maybe can I pass the word to you to this point, or what you wanted to say before?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to quickly address before I come back to the scalability and replication point is with the pollution. I think on the other hand as well, with indoor agriculture, you have the advantage of controlling these pollution streams. And for instance, let's say emissions of the biggest emission of a vertical farm is really the heat that comes off the LED lights. And one of the experiments that we've had the pleasure of doing within FOCUSE is trying to, being in this controlled condition, is to harness this heat. And then what a company is doing that we've been working with is actually pushing that flow into a parking garage and actually being paid for doing so to regulate the heat of a parking garage. So instead of just the heat emissions from one of the biggest hotspots, the LED lights of a vertical system, just going into thin air, it's being used and harnessed. So there are opportunities to tap into these streams, into these emissions, which is fantastic. And then going back to the question about scale and replication, very much I think scalability really depends upon the market for the product and the competitiveness, and also the maturity of that technology, whether it's ready or not, to what stage it is. So when we're talking about byproducts, or when I've been speaking about taking the byproduct of production process A and then feeding it into production process B, there's a lot of intermediate processing. You can't just take one byproduct and put it into another. There's a lot of costs involved in this. And very much coming from this industrial symbiosis background, I think there's an important role of a facilitator, somebody to bring these together, and also trust. So there's a lot of social sciences that can really help here to figure out how to connect people. Because let's say we have the quantity of the product on the one hand, but how do we get this through from a market point of view and also from a trust point of view? How do I know that this production system can deliver this quantity on a monthly basis and not perhaps have a fault in the production, or their inputs are they have a fault in the inputs? I think there's a lot to do with scale and replication that we need to look into, and this is a fantastic question for sure.
Excellent. Leah, please.
Yeah, so in the Feed for Food, we also have a dashboard. Now, many people do dashboarding these days, but the idea is that what makes it special is first that we ask the participants, what is it that you want to measure? So what are the key performance indicators that you think are important? And secondly, that it has three layers. So the first layer is giving back to the participants that give the data something that is useful for them. So for the farmers, just an idea of bookkeeping. Then at the layer above that would be the managers, so they can have more general ideas, like, is what we are doing, does it make sense? How successful is it? And then there's the highest level where we as researchers, we can really do statistical analysis. So because your question was, are all these places so different that we cannot learn? So what we try to do is actually learn lessons that would, yes, still be specific, because we have by choice the places that represent different climatic and agroecological conditions, and also different ways of doing it. So peri-urban agriculture in Romania, we have a garden in Cyprus, and we have more home gardens in Greece. So looking at what works and what are the disadvantages, but also within the context, but trying through the dashboards to learn also and to develop those business models that would cater for different types of urban agriculture initiatives. I do side with Cameron. It's all about, is there, and also what Pauline said before, is there a market? Are people willing to buy the products? But are we also still keeping, let's say, being faithful to ourselves in the sense of keep on targeting poor segments of the society and not saying, well, the easy way out is to really go with targeting the richer population that wants to be and can afford to be sustainable, etc. So it's again, back to the business models. Can we really design business models that can be sustainable, also financially and economically? And so therefore, we also did in our beginning, like setting the stage, some research, like what would be the potential for this in the cities where we work, and what would be the potential in other cities. So, but it's like Cameron saying, it needs a lot, but it also needs, I think, to in the project stage already think about how can we scale and what could be system effects, because things that work when you are still small and beautiful may not work when you scale up. So when you are small, I mean, the market prices do not change if I sell like three carrots. But if I start to sell 3,000 kilograms of carrots, then maybe also prices change or input prices go up, or bigger players in the system may become anxious and start to push back. So all this idea, like, can you scale up? It's not about just replicating and doing it 10 times. You really have to think about system effects, not only economically, but also politically and societally. And I think that is still research that is not so much done. Thinking what will happen if we're actually going to become a force in the urban context.
Excellent. And thank you also for pointing out some research gaps. I'm sure there's some researchers in our audience today, and for pointing out the critical role of learning and evaluation from the very outset. Pauline, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to refer to this market price. I also see a comment from Michael Martin in the chat, and I totally agree with that, because I think there is a market. People really like to buy local produce, and they really like the fact that it's produced locally without pesticides and healthy. But if the price of a apple is like 1/10 of the price produced locally, then people still, I mean, it's really difficult to choose the expensive one for everyone. It's really difficult to always pay more for the same product. So I think, yes, we really need to think about business plan, like increasing the skill or whatever we can do to lower the price of local produce. But in the same time, I think the competition is maybe also unfair, because in Sweden and the Netherlands, I think everywhere in Europe, the prices of also hiring people is more expensive than in, for example, Africa. So we really need to think about what do we want to do about that, because we can really keep putting effort on like making things more attractive here regarding local products. But if we do not change the rest of the food system, it's really difficult for the consumer and also for municipalities to actually choose the local sustainable foods if it's much more expensive than the other option. So I think that really shows that the food system is like has also larger issues in terms of worldwide connections with each other.
Excellent. Leah, one quick last point before I have another question to all of you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just one point. I'm not arguing that local is always better, because when you think about resilience, how do we ensure that people always have the food? It's also necessary to be included in the global market or larger geographical markets, because otherwise, if something happens to your city, then you are in big trouble. So I'm not arguing that it's always better to be local, but I do side with Pauline that there should be fair competition. And what fair is a very difficult question, but yes, so again, don't misunderstand me saying, oh, we should all go and only buy like local, because there is a need for be local and global and regional at the same time.
to a certain level of balance. Now, before we end, we have one thing that we always do in an urban lunch talk, and I would like all of you to share one last thought. That is, what is one do and one don't for municipalities that want to boost urban food production? Who wants to start?
I can begin. Very much through experiences, I think support small, medium enterprise businesses, and this can be through through very simple. I mean, it's probably more at a national scale what I'm talking about, which is subsidies. I think subsidies need to channel to these businesses in order to support them to produce these highly nutritious foods, because especially they just get scaled out when it comes to the more conventional streams producing the same product type. Also, I think a super important thing is promote this circularity of resources, instead of just. Sometimes it's cheaper to pollute. I hate to say that. It really is. There needs to be tax here. There needs to be carrot and stick methods to do this. Here in Stockholm, it's very easy to just the effluence of the water for things to go in the waste, instead of recuperating them, all those nutrients, and process them. It's a lot more expensive. So there needs to be alternatives. And also, I think something which I'm going to vouch for is like something we've seen in countless examples across Europe. I'm thinking of Kullenberg and also Henderlow Park as well. These are industrial symbiosis examples of like eco-city parks as well. They're sharing resources with one another, and it comes down to a consortium of companies that help each other, support each other, pool resources, and learn from each other to do this. And I think these are fantastic examples that a lot of municipalities can learn from.
Perfect. All right. Leah, giving the word to you. One do, one don't.
The don't is the mirror of the do. I think what should be done is that cities commit long term to providing land, providing support. So really anchor it in local contracts or legislation, so that you're not so dependent on the political changes of local government, because that we have seen that happening, and then you think you have a lot, and then a new group of persons comes and it's not their loved baby, so then you're out. So really anchor it more in the like the formal legal structures. Try to avoid this dependency on the political will that may be there and next day it's gone.
Excellent. Pauline, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I actually want to add an example that is already implemented in Sweden, which I really like, because in Sweden there's like this logo from Sweden, and it's really clearly printed on every product that is produced in Sweden. And I think that's a super nice example how governments also can contribute, because it's really clear, oh, this is a local product, so this is actually grown in Sweden or produced in Sweden, and it can also motivate people to make the right choice. And I think these kind of initiatives, they do not cost so much for a government or municipality, but they can really help people to make clear where something is coming from. And I also agree with what Leah said. Of course, not everything cannot be local. For example, we have a small trial banana plantation in the Netherlands, but that will not work on a larger scale. I think still the bananas will come from Colombia, and it would be nice if they're all produced organically. But at the same time, we can look what can be produced locally, and how can governments help that with like just printing a simple logo on the products. I think it can really make a difference.
Perfect. Thank you so much, all. Various co-benefits, including the inclusion of different groups and bringing people together. We need definitely political will. We need continuity so that projects can go on beyond their life cycle, and economic perspective is key. And early learning in the project doesn't harm as well. These are just some of the takeaways that I have from this fantastic discussion. I could listen to all of you for much longer than the hour we just had. I want to thank our panelists and also our very active audience for joining us today and for discussing with us. In a few days, you will find the recording of this conversation on YouTube. If you want to learn more from us, hear more from us, then sign up for our newsletter and follow us on LinkedIn. And last but not least, I want to point out that the next Urban Lunch Talk is on 3rd of December on scaling positive energy districts. With that, I say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for everyone for joining today and for this fantastic discussion. Thank you.